China conducted an underground nuclear test. China has all along exercised utmost restraint on nuclear testing, and the tests it has conducted are extremely limited in number.
In May 1992, China detonated a massive underground nuclear device, sending a shockwave through the planet that changed everything we thought we knew about the Alaskan wilderness. Seismometers across North America didn't just record a blast, they mapped an impossibility. A massive, pyramid-shaped structure buried deep beneath the permafrost, vibrating with a frequency that shouldn't exist. Today, we're going beyond the rumors to reveal why scientists believe this isn't just a relic, but an active portal. The 1992 glitch in the map. May 21, 1992. On that day, the Chinese government conducted one of its largest underground nuclear tests ever recorded at the Lop Nor site, detonating a device that was roughly 70 times more powerful than the blast at Hiroshima. The shockwaves were so immense that they literally rang the earth like a bell, sending seismic ripples through the mantle that were picked up by sensors all over the globe. But as these waves traveled through the crust and reached the rugged, frozen interior of Alaska, something went wrong with the data. Geologists and seismologists working for the government and private institutions weren't just seeing the expected geological reflections. Instead, they mapped a massive, symmetrical anomaly buried deep beneath the surface, located in a remote patch of wilderness between Nome and Mount Denali. It wasn't a mountain, and it certainly wasn't a natural rock formation because the waves were bouncing off a surface that was impossibly smooth and perfectly angled. This discovery might have stayed buried in classified files if it weren't for the persistent work of investigative journalists and whistleblowers who began to piece together a strange story about a square of darkness. The legend suggests that the seismic imaging revealed a pyramid-shaped structure that dwarfed the Great Pyramid of Giza in both scale and precision.
They said in Alaska, a pyramid was found larger than the one in Giza. They showed it on the map.
It was reportedly found at a depth that would suggest it has been hidden for thousands, if not millions, of years. During this time, local news stations like Channel 13 in Anchorage supposedly prepared a segment on the discovery, only to have the story abruptly pulled from the airwaves just minutes before it was scheduled to broadcast. This wasn't just a simple technical error or a change in the news cycle. Witnesses and former employees claimed that federal agents arrived at the station to seize the footage and the seismic maps. This immediate and heavy-handed response from the authorities is what transformed a geological curiosity into a full-blown conspiracy, as people began to wonder why the government would go to such lengths to hide a pile of old stones in the middle of nowhere. The narrative gained even more traction when former military personnel and government contractors started coming forward with their own accounts of what was happening in the Alaskan interior. One of the most famous accounts comes from a retired counterintelligence officer who claimed that the site was actually a massive power generator of unknown origin, one that was interfering with military communications and radar systems in the region. This individual suggested that the structure wasn't built by any human civilization we are familiar with, but was instead an ancient piece of technology that predates the Ice Age. This brings us to the core of the mystery. The Black Pyramid isn't just a physical object, it's a hole in our historical record. The 1992 nuclear test didn't create the pyramid, it just accidentally turned on the lights, revealing a ghost in the machine that the world was never supposed to see. But to grasp how a massive structure could stay hidden for centuries, we have to look at the ground it's buried in. The Alaska Triangle and geological anomalies. When we talk about the Alaskan wilderness, we are discussing a landscape that is as beautiful as it is predatory, but there is one specific region that defies every conventional rule of geography and survival. This area is known as the Alaska Triangle, a vast expanse stretching from Anchorage and Juneau in the south to Utqiagvik on the northern coast. And it is within these borders that the Black Pyramid is said to reside. Statistically speaking, this is the most dangerous place in North America for any traveler, because more people go missing here per capita than anywhere else on the planet. Since the early 70s, over 20,000 individuals have vanished into this green and white abyss without leaving behind a single scrap of clothing, a footprint, or a distress signal. While skeptics will point to the harsh terrain and the predatory wildlife, seasoned search and rescue teams often report something much more unsettling. They speak of electronic equipment failing without warning, of GPS units showing them moving in circles when they are walking in a straight line, and of an oppressive, heavy silence that seems to swallow sound entirely. This isn't just a matter of getting lost in the woods. It is a matter of the environment itself, seemingly malfunctioning. Let's look at the concept of magnetic declination and gravitational mascons, or mass concentrations. In most parts of the world, a compass needle points toward the magnetic north with a predictable degree of error. But inside the Alaska Triangle, the needle often spins or stalls. Geologists have identified massive subterranean pockets of high-density material that create localized gravitational anomalies, essentially warping the magnetic field of the Earth in small, concentrated bursts. On a purely educational level, these are known as magnetic vortices, and they occur naturally in areas with high concentrations of magnetite or volcanic activity. However, the anomalies reported near the site of the Black Pyramid don't behave like natural deposits. They are far too localized and far too intense, suggesting that whatever is buried under the permafrost isn't just a hunk of iron ore, but a structured object with its own internal magnetic signature. If you have a massive, metallic, pyramid-shaped object sitting miles underground, it would act like a giant magnet, pulling on the local field and creating dead zones where radio waves and satellite signals simply cannot penetrate. This brings us to the fascinating and often misunderstood reality of how the Earth's crust can hide massive voids and structures for millennia. We often think of the ground beneath our feet as a solid, immovable mass, but Alaska is geologically young and incredibly active, sitting right on the edge of the Ring of Fire. The process of subduction, where one tectonic plate slides beneath another, creates massive subterranean chambers and bubbles in the lithosphere. While nature often creates columnar basalt, hexagonal rock pillars that can look uncannily like man-made stairs or walls, it almost never produces a perfect four-sided pyramid with smooth, polished faces at a 52-degree angle. That specific geometry is the hallmark of intelligent design, echoing the mathematical precision of the Giza Plateau. In the Alaskan interior, the permafrost acts as a perfect preservative, a layer of frozen soil and ice that can be hundreds of feet thick, effectively shrink-wrapping whatever lies beneath it. For thousands of years, the shifting glaciers and silt deposits have acted as a natural cloaking device, burying this anomaly under a layer of earth that looks, from the surface, like any other mountain or tundra ridge. But the mystery deepens when we consider the hum. Local indigenous oral histories and modern researchers alike have documented a low-frequency vibration that seems to emanate from the ground in the heart of the triangle. This is often dismissed as seismic noise or the sound of shifting ice, but sensitive acoustic equipment has recorded a steady rhythmic pulse.
There's a few different types of piezoelectric crystal that you can buy, but I'm going to look at quartz in particular, which is the first piezoelectric crystal to ever be discovered.
That matches the resonant frequency of quartz and granite. In the world of physics, if you apply pressure to quartz, you create an electrical charge known as piezoelectricity. Now, imagine a structure the size of a skyscraper made of high quartz content stone, buried under the immense pressure of the Alaskan crust and the weight of the permafrost. It wouldn't just sit there. It would effectively become a massive vibrating battery, generating a field of energy that could, in theory, interfere with the very fabric of the local atmosphere. This is why pilots avoid certain corridors in the Alaskan interior. They aren't just afraid of the weather, they are afraid of the invisible walls that seem to knock their instruments into a tailspin. We are looking at a location where the natural geology of the Earth has been hijacked by an artificial presence, creating a pocket of reality that operates by its own set of rules. It's important to realize that the government isn't just ignoring these anomalies, they have been mapping them for decades. During the Cold War, Alaska was the front line of defense against the Soviet Union, leading to the construction of the distant early warning line and various secret listening posts. If there is a massive energy-emitting structure in the middle of this strategic zone, there is zero chance it went unnoticed by military sensors. The official silence on the matter is loud. especially when you consider that the areas surrounding the alleged pyramid are often designated as restricted airspace or research zones that are off-limits to civilian hikers. When you combine the missing persons reports, the erratic behavior of compasses, and the rhythmic seismic pulse, a picture begins to emerge of a hidden titan beneath the ice, a structure that doesn't just exist in Alaska, but actively shapes the environment around it. If this were just a mountain, the compasses would stay still, but in the shadow of the Black Pyramid, the laws of physics start to bend. The architecture of the void. If the Black Pyramid actually exists, its construction defies every known architectural convention of the ancient world. Witnesses who claim to have seen the seismic data describe a surface that is not made of traditional masonry, like the limestone blocks of Egypt, but rather a singular, seamless material that resembles a polished, obsidian-like black stone. This brings up a fascinating question in the realm of materials science. What substance could survive the crushing pressures of the Alaskan subterranean environment while remaining completely undetected by standard ground-penetrating radar? Some theoretical physicists suggest that the pyramid might be composed of a carbon lattice metamaterial, a substance engineered at the molecular level to be virtually indestructible and, more importantly, stealth to electromagnetic waves. This wouldn't just be a building, it would be a piece of advanced hardware designed to absorb and redirect energy rather than reflecting it. This explains why, despite our modern satellite LiDAR and high-resolution imaging, the site appears as nothing more than a void or a shadow on the map. It isn't that the pyramid is invisible, it's that it is actively swallowing the light and radio waves we use to see. The geometry of a four-sided pyramid is not just an aesthetic choice. It is a highly efficient shape for the collection and amplification of ambient energy. On an educational level, we can look at the work of engineers who study pyramid power from a non-mystical perspective, focusing instead on the way a pyramidal shape can focus electromagnetic fields into its center. In the case of the Alaska anomaly, researchers speculate that the structure acts as a massive passive energy collector, pulling ions from the Earth's ionosphere and heat from the geothermal vents below. This creates a thermal chimney effect, but on a quantum scale. If the internal chambers of the pyramid are lined with superconducting materials or specific types of crystals, the structure could theoretically generate a standing wave, a constant, vibrating field of energy that never dissipates. This isn't science fiction, it's the basic principle of a resonator. When you consider that the pyramid is located in a region of high tectonic stress, the constant pressure on its walls would generate a massive piezoelectric charge, essentially turning the entire mountain range into a giant, subterranean power plant that has been running on autopilot for thousands of years. But what would you do with that much power? In modern engineering, we use concentrated energy for communication or propulsion, but the Black Pyramid seems to be doing something much more radical. There are theories suggesting that the pyramid's internal geometry is designed to facilitate torsion fields, a controversial area of physics that deals with the twisting of space-time itself. If you can generate enough concentrated energy into a specific point, like the apex of a pyramid, you can, in theory, create a localized distortion in the gravitational field. This would explain the heavy feeling reported by people in the Alaska Triangle and the strange atmospheric phenomena like the aurora borealis appearing more vibrantly or erratically directly above the coordinates of the site. The structure isn't just sitting in the dirt, it is anchored into the very fabric of the planet, acting as an atmospheric stabilizer, or perhaps a disruptor. This leads us to the concept of the black stone as a dark matter collector. Because dark matter interacts so weakly with normal matter, you would need a structure of immense density and specific geometric alignment to even begin to influence it. If the pyramid is a dark matter lens, it would be the most significant piece of technology on the planet, capable of providing limitless energy or altering the fundamental constants of physics within its immediate vicinity. The sheer scale of the engineering required to build something like this, miles underground, in one of the most geologically unstable regions of the world, suggests a level of mastery over gravity and materials that we are only just beginning to imagine. We have to ask ourselves, who builds a machine the size of a city and then buries it? Some researchers point to the possibility of a pre-Adamite or antediluvian civilization that possessed a deep understanding of longitudinal waves and planetary resonance. To them, the pyramid wouldn't have been a tomb or a temple, but a vital piece of planetary infrastructure, perhaps used to stabilize the Earth's axis or to provide a global wireless power grid, much like the one Nikola Tesla dreamed of. The black color of the material is also significant. In physics, a black body is a perfect absorber of energy. By making the structure entirely black and non-reflective, the builders ensured that no energy was wasted and no signal was leaked. It is a closed system of perfect efficiency. As we look closer at the void, where the pyramid should be, we start to realize that the structure itself might be a machine that is still on. The low-frequency hum, the magnetic anomalies, and the interference with modern flight paths all suggest an active internal mechanism. This isn't a ruin, it's a dormant or idling engine. The black stone isn't just cold rock, it's a sophisticated hull protecting a core that we can't even begin to comprehend. We are standing on the doorstep of a facility that was designed to outlast empires, outlast ice ages, and perhaps outlast humanity itself. The architecture of the void tells us that we aren't the first intelligent beings to claim this land, and if the power levels being measured are any indication, we are certainly not the most powerful. A structure this perfect isn't built to house a king. It's built to move energy, or perhaps to move us. If the structure itself is a machine, then the portal isn't a door, it's an output. The portal, cracking the quantum code. When we hear the word portal, our minds usually go straight to Hollywood, a shimmering ring of blue light or a swirling vortex in the sky. But in the world of high-level theoretical physics and the specific context of the Alaska anomaly, the reality is likely much more subtle and far more terrifying. If the Black Pyramid is indeed housing a portal, we aren't talking about a doorway made of wood and hinges. We are talking about a localized gravitational singularity. To understand this, we have to look at the work of Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen and their concept of the bridge, or what we now call a wormhole. For decades, the math has proven that these bridges are theoretically possible, but they require an immense amount of energy and a specific kind of exotic matter to keep them from collapsing instantly.
I received an email from a man named Doug Muchler. He said, there is something underground in Alaska that was public in 1992, and somebody didn't want the world to know. He's puzzled and suspicious, and he did have my attention.
If the reports from the 1992 seismic survey are accurate, the Black Pyramid is generating exactly the kind of high-energy, low-frequency field that could stabilize such a rift. The portal isn't an object you walk through. It is a point where the geometry of space-time has been folded until two distant locations are touching. From an educational perspective, we have to talk about the Bose-Einstein condensate, or BEC. This is a state of matter that occurs at temperatures close to absolute zero, where atoms lose their individual identity and begin to act as a single superatom. In this state, quantum effects that usually only happen at the microscopic level, like teleportation and entanglement, can suddenly happen on a scale we can actually see. If the interior of the Black Pyramid is being kept at the extreme sub-zero temperatures typical of the deep Alaskan permafrost, and if it is using the piezoelectric energy we discussed earlier, it could be maintaining a massive BEC field. Within this field, the normal laws of cause and effect are suspended. This is what scientists mean when they talk about a portal in a technical sense. It is a region of space where the local reality has been replaced by a quantum bridge. If you were to step into this field, you wouldn't necessarily feel a change, but your physical coordinates in the universe would no longer be fixed to the surface of the Earth. You would be, for all intents and purposes, unsynced from our timeline. This leads us to the terrifying possibility of torsion fields and their role in the pyramid's function. While mainstream science is still debating the existence of torsion, many researchers in the fringe and military sectors believe it is the key to instantaneous communication and travel. Unlike electromagnetic waves, which have a speed limit, the speed of light, torsion fields are thought to move through the vacuum of space at superluminal speeds. If the Black Pyramid is a torsion field generator, the portal is actually a massive transmitter. It isn't just a way to go from point A to point B on Earth, It's a way to interface with a global or even interstellar network. This is why the seismic waves from the 1992 blast didn't just bounce off the pyramid, they seemed to disappear into it. The structure wasn't just absorbing the sound, it was swallowing the information and sending it somewhere else. We are looking at a piece of technology that treats the entire planet like a giant circuit board, and the Alaska site is one of the primary processors. But what happens when a portal actually opens? According to leaked accounts from researchers who have allegedly worked on the site, the discovery wasn't a visual one, but a measurement of time. When atomic clocks were brought near the suspected apex of the buried structure, they began to drift. Time itself was moving slower inside the pyramid's field than it was outside. This is a classic sign of gravitational time dilation, the same phenomenon you would experience near the event horizon of a black hole. This means the portal is effectively a time machine, though perhaps not in the way we think. It creates a bubble of reality where the passage of time is decoupled from the rest of the world. This would explain why the structure remains so pristine despite being thousands of years old. For the material of the pyramid itself, only a few centuries might have actually passed. It is effectively frozen in a different state of being, a permanent rift in the continuity of our planet's history. The most riveting aspect of this theory is the idea of macro-scale quantum entanglement. If the Alaska pyramid is entangled with another structure, perhaps one on the moon, or even further away, then anything that happens to the matter inside the Alaska portal is instantaneously reflected at the other end. This isn't travel in the traditional sense, it is a simultaneous existence in two places at once. If the government has indeed found a way to access this, they aren't just looking at a historical curiosity. They are looking at the ultimate strategic advantage. Imagine being able to move personnel or data across the globe or off-planet without ever crossing the intervening space. The Black Pyramid wouldn't just be a secret. It would be the most heavily guarded resource in human history. The discovery isn't that a portal exists. It's that we finally found the on switch for a machine that we didn't build and can barely control. The question isn't just where the portal leads, but who left the key turned in the lock. The military no-fly zones and covert science. When you look at a map of the Alaskan interior, you'll notice vast swaths of land that are curiously empty of human habitation, yet bristling with high-tech sensors and restricted airspace. This isn't just because the terrain is rugged. It's because the region is home to some of the most sophisticated and secretive electronic warfare and atmospheric research facilities on the planet. To understand the cover-up surrounding the Black Pyramid, we have to talk about HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. While the official line is that HAARP is a civilian and military program designed to study the ionosphere for better radio communications, its location in Gakona, Alaska, puts it in direct proximity to the alleged coordinates of the Dark Pyramid. On an educational level, HAARP works by heating the ionosphere with high-frequency radio waves, creating a localized plasma cloud that can reflect signals or penetrate deep into the ground. It is essentially a massive underground radar system. If you wanted to study a buried, non-natural structure that absorbs standard electromagnetic waves, a facility like HAARP is exactly the tool you would build to do it.
With geo-electromagnetic energy, and that abundance of electromagnetic energy results in all kinds of strange things.
The history of military interest in the Alaska Triangle dates back to the early Cold War and the creation of the White Alice communications system. This was a series of massive tropospheric scatter antennas designed to provide a secure communication link across the Arctic. But veterans who served at these remote stations have often told stories that don't fit the official mission briefings. They speak of dead zones, where radar would return a solid, unmoving contact that sat miles beneath the Earth, and of being ordered to ignore signals that originated from the deep interior, signals that were too rhythmic and too powerful to be geological in nature. These military no-fly zones aren't just for protecting classified aircraft, they are containment zones. If the Black Pyramid is emitting a constant high-energy hum that interferes with cockpit electronics and GPS, the easiest way to prevent a public disaster is to simply erase that portion of the sky from civilian flight paths. You don't have to explain why a pyramid exists, if you never let anyone fly close enough to crash into its magnetic field. We also have to consider the role of the dark star and other covert satellite programs that have supposedly been used to map the site from orbit. While civilian satellites like those used by Google Earth often show a strange blurred glitch or a repetitive texture over certain coordinates in the Denali Wilderness, military-grade synthetic aperture radar can see through the trees, the ice, and the top several hundred feet of the crust. If the government is sitting on high-resolution images of a three-sided or four-sided structure in the Alaskan permafrost, they aren't going to share them on a public server. This is where the concept of disinformation becomes a vital educational tool. In intelligence circles, the best way to hide a real secret is to surround it with a dozen fake ones. They let the Black Pyramid story leak out as a wild conspiracy theory so that when a serious scientist sees the seismic anomalies, they immediately associate it with UFO hunters and cranks, making them hesitant to put their professional reputation on the line to investigate it. The paper trail of the Black Pyramid is a series of strategic silences. There are no official reports because the project would fall under Special Access Programs, or SAPs, which operate with zero congressional oversight. In these programs, the technology isn't just studied, it is back-engineered. If the pyramid is a portal or a power source, the goal wouldn't be to tell the world. It would be to weaponize the discovery. This is why the area remains a dead zone for civilian GPS, and why hikers who wander too far into certain valleys report being intercepted by unmarked helicopters. It's not that the government is afraid you'll find the pyramid. It's that they're afraid you'll find the infrastructure they've built around it to harvest its energy. The secret isn't just the ancient stone. It's the modern wires and cables that have been snaked into the ice to tap into a power source that doesn't belong to us. Maybe the reason we haven't seen the pyramid on satellite is because someone or something is jamming the signal from the inside. Global resonance and the ancient network. If a massive, energy-conducting pyramid exists beneath the Alaskan ice, we must stop viewing it as an isolated anomaly and start seeing it as a single node in a planetary system. This is the core of global resonance theory. When you map the world's most significant ancient structures, Giza, the submerged ruins of Yonaguni, and the forbidden White Pyramids of China, they aren't scattered randomly. They align with specific longitudinal points on what researchers call the world grid. These ley lines aren't just myths. They represent corridors of telluric energy, or natural electrical currents flowing through the Earth's mantle. An advanced civilization wouldn't build a monument anywhere. They would build it at a pressure point, where this planetary energy is most concentrated. The Alaska Pyramid sits at a critical junction, acting as a northern anchor for a network spanning the Pacific Rim. There is a startling correlation between this site and the Dragon's Triangle near Japan, another region notorious for magnetic anomalies. If you draw a line through the Earth's center from these coordinates, you find a system designed to communicate through the planet's core using long-wave resonance. Think of the Earth as a giant bell. The Alaska site is the tuning fork. By maintaining a constant low-frequency vibration, it could stabilize tectonic plates or act as a global wireless power relay. When the 1992 nuclear test occurred in China, the shockwave didn't just travel through rock. It traveled through this prehistoric internet. The Alaska node picked up the signal and rang in response, revealing a global nervous system built not with silicon, but with gravity and the fundamental resonance of the Earth itself. Maybe the pyramid isn't an island. Maybe it's part of a nervous system. Follow us for more. Subscribe to the channel and don't miss out.